Hi, everybody. Welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. I got an email from Anonymous who saw this on one of her social media pages and wanted my thoughts on this. And I'm glad that she brought this up, something that I didn't know about. And it opens a really interesting door. We're going to review a few things that we've already covered on the channel, like what Brad Wilcox said last year in 2022 about what happens at the second coming and when 2 billion people want to join the church all in a day. I took the time to transcribe that, add it to my collection of quotes. We're going to look at some numbers using Dodge City, Kansas as a example. Going to show you a few things that President Eyring has said, Gordon B. Hinckley. We're going to look at the book of Revelation about this idea of two harvests, the second harvest, the first harvest and the second harvest. So this will be interesting. So here we go. Okay, so there's two quotes in this meme thing right here. The first one is from President Gordon B. Hinckley, and it's found in the July Ensign of 2008. So I decided just to go directly to the Ensign, and I'm going to have to read this whole thing so that we can understand the full context here. It's pretty short, though, so don't worry. And then after that, there's a second quote. Now, this is from President, well, at the time, Elder Henry B. Eyring. This was February 1999. And it seems to me that he was talking to, this was some kind of, I don't know, it may have been a devotional or something like that. But the title for this is Steg e Tro, which when you look that up, I was like, what does that mean? I just did a Google search and this came up, and it's something from Swedish, and it basically means leap of faith. That's how it's translated, leap of faith. So with this second one, I wasn't able to find it anywhere to verify it, which is fine. I don't doubt that he did say this, but I really always want to verify my sources. So when we get to this point, if any of you guys can point me in the right direction, if you can send me something, a link or whatever, to where I can actually find this and verify it myself, I would greatly appreciate it. So let's begin with what President Hinckley said about the second harvest. Okay, so this is well, it looks like this is actually what I pulled up was the July 2000 ensign. So this is Göteborg, Sweden. A Second Harvest by Erik Nilsson. In recent years, in the Göteborg, Sweden stake, the Mattsson twins have taken the lead. Hans Mattsson served as a stake president for several years, and upon his release, his twin brother, Leif, I don't know how it's pronounced, was called as president. The twins have shared a similar goal: to lead the stake forward into a quote-unquote second harvest. Interesting. A term they first heard as young missionaries in England. At the close of their missions, they attended a conference where Elder Gordon B. Hinckley of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles spoke. Quote, in the middle of his talk, says President Leif Mattsson, Elder Hinckley looked right at us and said, you are the Mattsson twins from Sweden who are soon going home, right? Let me say a few words to you that I want you to take home to Sweden. Then he lifted a glass of water and pointed to it. Sweden has for many years been like this glass of water. Not much action. In the middle 1800s, when the first missionaries came to Sweden, thousands of people joined the church. It was a great and mighty harvest. When you go home, I want you to tell the members that there will be a new harvest, a second harvest in Sweden, that will bring thousands of Swedes into the church. End quote. As the Mattsson twins and others have served, growth has come to the Göteborg stake, which is located on the western edge of Sweden. Why don't we look that up? Sorry, I always have to look at maps. It's just how I do it. Okay, so it's in the southern part of the country, over here, like in the basically the southwest. Okay, so that's where Sweden is. Let me zoom out. Europe, okay, Norway, Sweden, Finland. Here's Gothenburg. I suppose that that's the same place as what's being referred to here. Okay. Quote, "The Lord is leading this work," says President Leif Matson. "It's time to get our scythe and go out to the harvest." End quote. The first harvest began when John E. Forsgren, a Swedish seaman who accepted the gospel while docked in Boston, Massachusetts, was called to return to his homeland to preach the gospel. One of the early branches was organized in 1856, which that just like blows my mind. This is not too long after the church was formed. The church was organized in 1830, but just a little while after that already, I don't know. It's amazing. In Vastra Forlunda. Today, it is a ward in the Göteborg stake, and it continues to grow as the second harvest gains momentum. So, from the perspective of this article, and from the perspective of the twins, and I don't know. I mean, I'd invite your opinion, but make sure to watch the whole video first because it's kind of hard to tell. Was President Hinckley just talking about Sweden, or is the second harvest a more general concept that applies to the entire Earth? Well, I think both could be true. In this article, it makes it seem like he's essentially just talking about Sweden, but there could be a couple layers to this. Okay, so look. The active and lively group of nearly 400 members includes many youth studying to become engineers, doctors, or lawyers, as well as many already established in their professions. Okay, I'm just going to skip down. Quote, "We have preached the gospel for many years in Sweden," says President Leif Matson. "There are many people who have had some contact with the church. We believe the harvest time is here." Okay, now, so he uses the word "we believe," so he doesn't know for sure, and unless some general authority, apostle, prophet told him as such, then he doesn't really know. It could apply to not just Sweden, but to more, potentially. So this is the first quote, okay? I'll put the link for this in the description below, just like I do for every video. Now, let's read the second one. Now, this is supposed to be from Elder Henry B. Eyring in a talk called Steg i Tro, which in Swedish is like leap of faith, February 1999. Now, believe me, I searched high and low to try and find this. So I don't know who has this, where it can be found. Is it in a book? Is it on the internet anywhere? I don't know. So, like I said, I don't necessarily doubt it, but I can't verify it either. So, the Lord has revealed that this is Henry B. Eyring. The Lord has revealed that the time has now come when this will happen, but has not revealed which day it will begin. Okay, so this is interesting. He's like talking about the second harvest as though there's an actual day where it begins. "The time has finally come when the Lord will say yes." And many of those who have been in contact with the gospel throughout the years, but never fully received it, will be baptized. The day will come when everything will fall into place and many will gladly accept the gospel and will become a part of the second harvest. Interesting. It sounds like what President Hinckley was talking about. When thousands upon thousands will join the church, the second harvest will be much greater than the first. Moving the pioneers across the plains to Utah was a miracle in itself, but bringing even more new members through the church program during one single year, and the person that put this meme together highlighted that in red, will be an even greater miracle. So this part right here reminds me where it says, uh, during one single year will be an even greater miracle. That reminds me of what Elder Bednar said in the Philippines. I did a video about this, but let me just remind you. You can find this quote on my timeline 10 Lost Tribes spreadsheet. Okay. This is a spreadsheet where These are quotes only having to do with the 10 lost tribes, and all the statements I can find having to do with them, or scriptures that have to do with them, uh, because I have to put it in chronological format in order to show that the thinking on the 10 lost tribes has changed over time. In the early part of the church, it seems like many people thought that there was a hidden group somewhere that would come out from a mysterious place before the second coming. But in recent years, sometime in the 50s or 60s, that changed. So just go see my playlist called 10 Lost Tribes if you want to dig more into that. But the most recent quote that I have comes from this year. I have this on here because it references a scripture um, in Jeremiah, actually two verses that talk about the 10 lost tribes coming back is going to be greater than the parting of the Red Sea. And so some people will say, well, we haven't seen that. We haven't seen a miracle greater than the parting of the Red Sea. Therefore, we know the 10 lost tribes have not come back yet because they're working from that paradigm. So this is Elder Bednar, and this is a YouTube video, by the way. Philippines area-wide broadcast. Become a temple-ready people. It starts at the 31-minute and 21-second mark, and the link for it is here in this cell. If you copy and paste this cell onto one of your documents, you can get the link for it, or just search it by title, or just search Elder Bednar Philippines. You'll find it. Okay, so he says, so think of Gordon B. Hinckley in the early 1960s coming here and leaving 6 North American missionaries, and that was it. And look at here. I misspelled that. Coming here and leaving 6 North American missionaries, and that was it. And I did it again. Look at here and all throughout the Philippines today. This is a miracle greater than the parting of the Red Sea. And it will continue because of the devotion, the consecration, and faithfulness of the members. So it's interesting, Elder Bednar talking about the growth of the church in the Philippines, right? And calling that a miracle greater than the parting of the Red Sea. Compare that to what we just read. He said, moving the pioneers across the plains of Utah was a miracle in itself, but bringing even more new members through the church program during one single year will be an even greater miracle. It will happen. And then I guess later on in the talk, the second miracle which will happen in connection to the work of the harvest is that those who convert will remain active in the church on a completely different scale. The members will be better prepared to take care of them, and the new converts will love the gospel, remain faithful for the rest of their lives, and never fall away. Elder Eyring emphasized, we need faith to bring to pass this miracle in our stakes of Zion. My words have power thanks to your faith. Through the faith of the members, our words and actions will have power to realize this. So, I don't know. Maybe this was somebody's notes. Maybe they transcribed it. I don't know. If any of you know how I can get a hold of this, the original copy or where it's published, please let me know. Send me an email. Okay. So, essentially, in both cases, they're talking about like an accelerated growth. And the question remains, in these two cases with President Hinckley and who is now President Eyring, were they only talking about Sweden, or are they talking about the entire church? And the second harvest, has it already began, or is that in reference to the second coming and what happens after that? Okay, well, now let's move on. I'll show you what I found. Okay, so let's read in Revelation chapter 14, okay, from verse 14 down to verse 20. And I looked, well, no, first let's read the chapter heading. The Lamb will stand upon Mount Zion. The gospel will be restored in the last days by angelic ministry. The Son of Man will harvest the earth. Okay. Verse 14. And I looked, and behold, a white cloud, and upon the cloud one sat like unto the Son of Man, having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle. And another angel came out of the temple, crying with a loud voice to him that sat on the cloud, Thrust in thy sickle and reap, for the time is come for thee to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. And he that sat on the cloud thrust in his sickle on the earth, and the earth was reaped. Okay, one. So the first angel, reap. Okay, and another angel came out of the temple, which is in heaven, and he also having a sharp sickle. So the first person that has a sickle in his hand is Christ. And an angel comes out of the temple and says, "Go ahead," and which is weird. It's like he's giving Christ orders. I'm sure that's not the intention of the way that this is written, but he tells Christ, uh, you know, harvest, thrust in your sickle. So he does. Then another angel came out of the temple, which is in heaven, he also having a sharp sickle. And another angel came out from the altar, which had power over fire, and cried with a loud cry to him that had the sharp sickle. So at this point, I'm assuming that's the second angel that came out who he himself had a sickle, saying, Thrust in thy sharp sickle and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe. And the angel thrust in, it says right here, and the angel thrust in his sickle into the earth and gathered the vine of the earth and cast it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. So this second harvest by the angel, the fruit that's being harvested is being cast into the winepress of the wrath of God. And the winepress was trodden without the city, and blood came out of the winepress, even unto the horse bridles, but by the space of 1,600 furlongs. So it describes two harvests there. I don't know that this is what President Hinckley and President Eyring have in mind, but let's read what it says in the Institute manual. Is this Institute? Yeah, this is the Institute manual. Okay, for Revelation chapter 14, verses 14 to 20, two harvests. That's the name of this section. John described two harvests in Revelation 14, 14 through 20, which are reminiscent of those described in the parable of the wheat and the tares. The first harvest gathers out the righteous from the wicked. This gathering began when the gospel was restored in the latter days and will continue into the millennium. All right, here's a depiction of people making grape juice with their feet. Gross. The second gathering represents God's judgments upon the wicked and the destruction that will come upon them when they, like grapes on the vine, are fully ripe in iniquity and are trodden down in the winepress of the wrath of God. Revelation chapters 15 and 16, 7 plagues. Revelation 15 appears to describe what the righteous gathered in the first harvest will experience, whereas Revelation 16 seems to describe what the wicked gathered in the second harvest will experience. Chapters 15 and 16 work together. In Revelation 15:1, verses 1 and 7, John learned of 7 destructive plagues that are to be poured out upon the wicked. Revelation 16 describes the 7 plagues. The repeated use of the number 7 may suggest that the plagues represent the completion of God's judgment against the wicked in the last days. Quote, "For in the 7 last plagues is filled up the wrath of God." Which there are some that would read that and say, no, it is literally 7 separate plagues. I mean, okay, that may be. I tend to agree with what the manual is suggesting here. The manual went through the correlation process to make sure that it was doctrinally sound. Okay, so now you might say, well, no, this cannot be talking about this. This isn't the same thing as what President Hinckley and President Eyring are talking about, because they're talking about growth of the church in the second harvest. They're very clearly talking about people joining the church. Now, I think that this could still apply because this is talking about the second coming. We know that the tares are going to be gathered together, bundled, and burned, right? What happens after that? What happens after that? So even though the tares are gathered, there's going to be a big harvest after that takes place. The reason why is because there's no longer going to be the craftiness of men. There's no longer going to be so much influence from Satan. Satan is going to be bound. Um, a lot of the deceit, the lies, the trickery, the flat out secret combinations to hold people from the truth, it's going to be removed. And that's something that we've been dealing with for 6,000 years, ever since the days of Cain, when secret combinations were introduced. So you might see how this gathering of the tares and them being burned at the second coming would lead into a great second harvest, so to speak. And I cannot say if that's what President Hinckley and President Eyring are talking about, but let me read you a really interesting thing from Brad Wilcox. Somebody, and they shouldn't have done this, recorded this fireside, but whatever, it's still up, and a lot of people have already seen this, so whatever. I went ahead and I took down what it has in the transcript right here. Very, very interesting talk. Who is Brad Wilcox? I guess officially now, and I don't know if this is new, he goes by Bradley R., or as far as the church is concerned, Bradley R. Wilcox. He is currently the first counselor in the Young Men General Presidency. He was the second counselor, and that's what he was at the time that he was doing that fireside. Okay, so I put this down on my quotes second coming spreadsheet, where this is kind of a timeline of quotes. These are quotes that mostly have to do with the second coming, or they have to do with just like big changes to the church, or like really what seem to be significant quotes in some fashion. Okay, I've put them all in chronological order. So, um, the beginning point, or like the timestamp for this, is 38 minutes and 3 seconds on this video right here. And this is what he says. And this is mind blowing. And but it makes so much sense. You know, when you logically play things through, if you put it on paper, you think it through in your mind, this is the logical conclusion. Okay. He says, but when the second coming comes, that's when these tribes are going to give us a totally different organization, a different level of organization that's going to become very important. I mean, right now we've got to get organized, because when Jesus comes and he says, by the way, I belong to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and that's what he's going to say. So do you think there's going to be a little interest in the church? Oh yeah. We will be, or we will be, will we be ready to have 2 billion people join the church in one day? Will we have enough stake presidents? Will we have enough bishops? Will we have enough young women presidents? Will we have enough full-time missionaries? Will we have enough full tithe payers? We got to get with it. We got to get organized so that when we have that huge influx into the church, it doesn't swamp us. We've got leaders all over the world who can handle that. So, Elder Darling, you're not going to Guatemala to baptize everybody, right? And so that's I think sometimes what we think when we go on our mission is like, we're like, oh, we need to have as many baptisms as possible, and that's true. That is, you know, the ideal. But he's saying here, so right now, before the second coming, so Elder Darling, you're not going to Guatemala to baptize everybody. Now, that's what your mission president might say, and that's certainly what your zone leader is going to say. But really, you're there just to get things organized, bring people into the church, help them become leaders, help people back into the church, and help them become leaders, help youth become leaders, help other missionaries become leaders. You've got to strengthen this organization so when Jesus comes, that's when we're going to baptize everybody, and we've got to be ready for that. That's pretty incredible, because I don't think that he's just speaking of, in and of himself. Like, that wasn't just his own rationale and thinking. That's probably a very real conversation that's been had in the church. And probably, I would imagine, more so recently than in the past, because they know that the time is upon us, that we're getting to that point. Um, so, but just in case you don't understand, so basically he's saying, look, the missionary work that we're doing right now, yes, we're doing a harvest. Yes, we're looking for scattered Israel. But at this portion of the harvest, it's like we're trying to get things ready for the big harvest in the millennium, for the second coming, when all that deception and deceit is going to be taken away. When all that's going to be remaining are people that are living a terrestrial and a celestial law. So it's like the people that are joining the church right now will become future leaders in the church. So let me just, in case you aren't familiar with this idea that there's going to be a big influx of people in the church. Brad Wilcox is not the first one to say it, and this has been in this whole idea of other religions existing at the beginning of the second coming and the need for the continuation of missionary work. This has been said many, 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 many times. In fact, I've come across a couple new quotes that I didn't have on this spreadsheet before. This is my quotes, common misconceptions spreadsheet. And I want to read a couple of these to you. In total, there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, something like 11, about 11 quotes that I have so far. There may be more. Okay, so let me just read some of this, because this backs up what Brad Wilcox said. Um, Starting with Joseph Smith Jr., the prophet. This is from Scriptural Teachings of the Prophet Joseph Smith, pages 268 to 269. While in conversation at Judge Adams during the evening, I said, Christ and his resurrected saints will reign over the earth during the 1,000 years. They will probably not dwell upon the earth, but will visit it when they please, or when it is necessary to govern it. There will be wicked men on the earth during the 1,000 years. The heathen nations who will not come up to worship will be visited with the judgments of God and must eventually be destroyed from the earth. Okay, now here's a new quote on this spreadsheet. This is from Brigham Young in the Journal of Discourses, Volume 2, page 316, column A. Do you expect that every person will be destroyed from the face of the earth but the Latter-day Saints? If you do, you will be mistaken. Many of our elders labor under these erroneous expectations when reading over the sayings of the apostles and prophets in regard to the coming of the Son of Man. In one verse, the prophet will be describing the second coming previous to the commencement of the millennium, and perhaps in the same verse he will describe a scene that will take place after the millennium, and when the earth will be cleansed from all wickedness, after Satan has been let loose a little season, and it had another tour upon it. And after it is renovated and becomes sanctified and is like a sea of glass, as John describes it. Will this be in the millennium? No. And just, this is me talking now. No, that part, that's talking about that space of time when Satan is let loose again, and you have the final war of Gog and Magog. There's two Gogs and Magogs, by the way. Some people think it's just at the end of the millennium. No. The final war before the millennium, and then the final war after the millennium is Gog and Magog. Anyway, and then afterwards it goes on to become a sea of glass. The earth does, because it becomes a celestial world. All right, Brigham Young. No, but the order of society will be as it is when Christ comes to reign 1,000 years. There will be every sort of sect and party, and every individual following what he supposes to be the best in religion, and in everything else similar to what is now. All right, so people aren't just going to magically all become Christian all of a sudden. They're not just going to magically join the church necessarily, or even believe in God for that matter. Look at this. Well, right here. Okay. This is from Joseph Fielding Smith in Doctrines of Salvation, Volume 1, page 86. Some members of the church have an erroneous idea that when the millennium comes, all people are going to be swept off the earth except righteous members of the church. That is not so. There will be millions of people, Catholics, Protestants, agnostics, Mohammedans, people of all classes and of all beliefs, still permitted to remain upon the face of the earth, but they will be those who have lived clean lives, those who have been free from wickedness and corruption, all who belong by virtue of their good lives to the terrestrial order, as well as those who have kept the celestial law, will remain upon the face of the earth during the millennium. Eventually, however, the knowledge of the Lord will cover the earth as the waters do the sea, right? But there will be need for the preaching of the gospel after the millennium is brought in. So missionary work isn't just going to stop. It's going to continue. And you have to think about April last year when they were really, really hardcore going at getting people to go on missions. And then during one of the fifth Sundays last year, they had us review those talks and those parts of those talks that talked about people going on missions. The church really wants people to go on missions right now. And I think it has everything to do with this, to hit the ground running when the millennium starts. Okay, so, but there will be need for the preaching of the gospel after the millennium is brought in, until all men are either converted or pass away. In the course of the 1,000 years, all men will either come into the church or kingdom of God, or they will die and pass away. In that day, there will be no death until men are old. Children will not die, but will live to the age of a tree. Isaiah says this is 100 years. When the time comes for men to die, they will be changed in the twinkling of an eye, and there will be no graves. Okay, here's a new one, also from Doctrines of Salvation, also in Volume 1, but on page 141. Two kingdoms, the ecclesiastical and political. The kingdom of God is the church. After Christ comes, all the peoples of the earth will be subject to him, but there will be multitudes of people upon the face of the earth who will not be members of the church. Yet all will live to be obedient to the laws of the kingdom of God, for it will have dominion upon the whole face of the earth. These people will be subject to the political government, even though they are not members of the ecclesiastical kingdom, which is the church. This government, which embraces all peoples of the earth, both in and out of the church, is also sometimes spoken of as the kingdom of God, because the people are subject to the kingdom of God, which Christ will set up. But they have their agency, and thousands will not be members of the church until they are converted. Yet, at the same time, they'll be subject to the theocratic rule. All right, and then there's one more I wanted to read because he brings up a crucial point, a key point, and it's this. This is also from Doctrines of Salvation, but this time volume 3, page 64. He says, the gospel will be taught far more intensely and with greater power during the millennium, until all the inhabitants of the earth shall embrace it. So, far more intensely and with greater power. That must require missionaries. So you have to wonder. You have to wonder about this whole business of the Lord's Youth Battalion, which is still an ongoing concept. And April 2022 General Conference in calling for missionaries in a way that I've never seen before. Satan shall be bound so that he cannot tempt any man. Should any man refuse to repent and accept the gospel under those conditions, then he would be accursed. Through the revelations given to the prophets, we learn that during the reign of Jesus Christ for 1,000 years, eventually all people will embrace the truth. Isaiah prophesied of the millennium as follows. The wolf shall also dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and the calf, and the young lion, and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. And the cow and the bear shall feed, their young ones shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. And the sucking child shall play on the hole of the asp, and the weaned child shall put his hand on the cockatrice's den. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of God, of the Lord, as the waters cover the sea. This chapter in Isaiah Moroni quoted to the prophet Joseph Smith and said to him, it was about to be fulfilled. If the knowledge of the Lord covers the earth as the waters do the sea, then it must be universally received. Moreover, the promise of the Lord through Jeremiah is that it will no longer be necessary for anyone to teach his neighbor, saying, know the Lord, for they shall all know me, from the least of them unto the greatest of them, saith the Lord. So at some point, everybody, there's not going to be any of this, oh, I've never heard of your church, or I've never heard of Jesus Christ, or whatever. Everybody's going to know at some point during the millennium. Now, I did a video a while ago going through this kind of like a little thought experiment looking at Dodge City, Kansas. Dodge City, Kansas, when you go to the meeting house locator on the church website, there is one meeting house in Dodge City, and according to the website, there is one ward. It is the Dodge City ward. Okay, so Dodge City has a population of 27,788. If half of them remain after the second coming, that would bring it down to 13,894. And let's pretend, and who knows what the numbers will actually be, but let's pretend that 70% of that wants to join the church. And I'm saying that because Dodge City, that, here in the Midwest, most people are Christian, okay? Or they have Christian family members, that's how they grew up, whatever. So I don't know. I feel like that's kind of reasonable. Let's say 70% wants to join the church. So the ward size is only about 300. Let's say. I don't really know, but a typical ward, somewhere floating around maybe 300. So 9,725 people suddenly in that city with just one ward want to join the church. And I tried to look up, and maybe some of you know how many Melchizedek priesthood holders there's supposed to be for each ward. I don't really know. I came across a thing that was talking about, I think it was talking about Hispanic wards, but it may have been talking about branches. I can't remember. So that's kind of where I got these numbers from, like how many Melchizedek priesthood holders. But let's just say about 15 Melchizedek priesthood holders in that ward, maybe more, maybe 20. So what are you going to need in order to absorb all those people in Kansas City, in Dodge City, Kansas? Well, I would imagine it would be all hands on deck, because you're going to have to be doing a lot of baptisms and a lot of confirmations, and then after that, a lot of teaching going on at church. People are going to probably have to step up people that know how the church actually operates, because you're going to have all these brand new people not knowing what to do. So if you feel comfy where you're at right now in your calling, thinking maybe you're someone that doesn't like leadership positions. I'm not one who does, but chances are, if you and I make it into the millennium, we might just be called to be in a leadership role. Whether that's bishop, relief society president, elders quorum president, whatever, you name it. Or more, stake president, stake relief society president. And you have to wonder, how quickly are they going to be able to perform those baptisms? Will it all be done in the church? Will you go to a nearby river? So with these things in mind, let's now look at the world. Okay, the current population is 8 billion, roughly. Church membership is approaching 17 million. And the current Melchizedek priesthood estimate is 840,000 Melchizedek priesthood holders. Let's say that half of the world makes it into the millennium, so just 4 billion. And let's say that half of the church makes it through. Okay, and I take that from the idea of the 10 virgins. I actually feel like I've heard it talked about in a general conference talk that they were saying, if they were talking about the number of people ready at the time of the second coming, and that they were making it seem like the parable of the 10 virgins was actually like 50%. So let's just say that half makes it through. So that leaves us with 8.4 million to 4 billion. And Melchizedek priesthood holders, 420. Okay. Again, remember, our church is not just, we're not all living a celestial law. There are wheat and there are tares in the church. People that have the Melchizedek priesthood that have fallen away. It could look like someone who's less active. It could look like someone who's inactive. It could look like somebody who is active in church, but in their personal life, they're doing something completely different. They're living a telestial lifestyle without anybody really knowing it. So you get the idea. And say that only 50% of those remaining worldwide want to join the church. That would be 2 billion people in a day. Okay. So, I don't know if these are like, if, church leaders have like thought about different numbers, when Bradley R. Wilcox, right? Was it R. Wilcox? Yeah, Bradley R. Wilcox. When he talks about 2 billion, is that a number that he's just coming up with from the top of his head? Or is that a number that they've actually maybe estimated, or prepared for? Who the heck knows? But I think there's a good chance of that. Now, let's take a look at let's look at a bunch of the changes that have taken place in the church, which I think have changed. When you make a change, it may be for multiple reasons. Several birds, one stone. And it may be that one of those birds is making it easier, for making this transition easier, and this influx of members people wanting to join the church. Okay. So April 1st, 2018, we're just looking at President Nelson's presidency. Ministering replaces home teaching, visiting teaching. And that's a term that's probably more familiar, especially in the Christian world. There's also less redundancy. Okay. Because it used to be before that if you were a female in the church, you would have home teachers for your household. And then on top of that, you personally, or in the other females in your house, would have visiting teachers from the Relief Society. So some redundancy, and it was probably appropriate for that time. But as we get ready to transition, it may be better to spread it out a little bit, because there's going to be more need for people to you get what I'm saying? If you have all these people suddenly join, then guess what? You're going to get a whole lot more. It's going to be more redundancy. So, okay, May 9th, 2018, the church will end relationship with Boy Scouts of America, announces new activity program for children and youth. That's worldwide. A program for a global church. We truly are right now a global church, but even more so when the second coming happens. June 18th, 2018, hymn book and children's hymn songbook will be revised to create new unified editions for the worldwide church. No pun intended, but it's probably good to have everybody on the same sheet of music. So stupid. August 16th, 2018, President Nelson issues a statement on using the full name of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Jesus Christ is the focus, and that's going to be something that's really important if you have essentially been brainwashed in another church that this church is bad, or the Mormon church. So let's start to reverse that. Let's use the correct name of the church. September 4th, 2018, first volume of the 4-volume Saints, the story of the Church of Jesus Christ in the latter days, is released. Now, isn't this a perfect isn't this a perfect series of books for people that are brand new to the church? They want to get up to speed. Hey, guess what? We have a whole series right here. and it's called The Story of the Church of Jesus Christ in the Latter Days. This is what you missed. Think about that. Have you ever thought about like what the purpose is? Is it just because the church thought it'd be a good idea? Like, hey, let's do this. Like, let's get it all down into a nice series of books, and this will be for the membership. Or do you think that there is more to it than that? I think there's probably more to it, and this will be a very helpful aid for people that are brand new to the church in the millennium, and now too, October 6th, 2018, home-centered, church-supported gospel study and adjustments to the Sunday meeting schedule are announced. Okay, so 2-hour church is easier. I've never attended any other church, but I'm not so sure. I don't know how long their meetings last. From what I hear in Catholicism, it seems like people only go to church a couple times a year, unless you're more on the devout side, in which case there's probably more involved. But whatever the case, 2-hour church would probably make it easier for a bunch of newcomers, regardless of what your background is. And then, there's this idea of, there's going to be this great need for learning. And so you can go to church and be taught there, yes, but there's probably going to be a great need for you as a new member to essentially teach yourself. And a way that you can do that is through the Come Follow Me program. Okay, December 14th, 2018, changes announced for primary progression, young men, priesthood ordination, and youth. So youth can get to the temple at 11 instead of 12. That's probably part of the hastening. I can't remember why I put this on here the first time. I haven't reviewed this again since I made that video. But anyway, I don't know. Okay, move on to the next one. Children of parents who identify themselves as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender may now be blessed as infants and baptized without First Presidency approval. And what I put here is, let's just get you on the covenant path now. Okay, so maybe that just has to do with like the hastening, and that's why I put it on here. May 6, 2019, 1 year waiting period for temple sealings after civil marriage is discontinued. Hastening. And not only hastening, but when the second coming happens, there's going to be a lot of people that, if we were going at it the old way, they'd be, brand new church and wanting to receive all the blessings of the gospel and the priesthood, having to wait for a year. There just probably wouldn't be a need for it so much in the millennium. So there's like this hastening before the second coming, but then when there's a large influx of people, that's probably going to go over smoother if people don't have to wait. And it's going to be a completely different world then than it is right now anyway. Okay, September 5th, 2019, the Book of Mormon video series release dates are announced. So this is another really, really good teaching tool for people that are brand new to the church, right? It visually shows new members what the Book of Mormon stories look like. You're going to have people coming in from all sorts of different backgrounds, different levels of learning and stuff like that. Lots of children, of course. So this will probably be really helpful in the millennium with a big influx of people. October 2nd, 2019, women, youth, and children may now serve as witnesses of sealing and baptismal ordinances. So I was kind of taken aback when that was announced. I didn't personally know of any doctrine that said that it had to be like that. And maybe it was better before now that it was done by priesthood holders, but ultimately not necessary when it comes down to it. And when we go into the millennium and there's a large influx of people wanting to join the church, instead of having a couple priesthood holders having to be at each baptism, now they themselves can go and do baptizing while women, youth, and children can serve as witnesses. So it's freeing up of resources, right? Priesthood resources. October 5th, 2019, ward young men presidencies are discontinued. Priesthood holders freed up. So this is what I think the benefit is. Now it's the bishop that runs the young men's, and so those 3 or 4 priesthood holders that used to be in with young men, because you'd have like a young men's leader and his 2 counselors, and then you'd have a secretary. I was the secretary in my early marriage. That was like one of my first callings after we got married. Um, now those 3 or 4 men are cleared up or freed up to go do other things in the ward. And I think it's really helpful if you have more people, for example, in elders quorum to answer questions, you know, instead of the smaller number that was already there before. Because there's going to be a lot of questions and discussions and things coming up during elders quorum, relief society, Sunday school. So let's free up these adults, um, and let's allow them to go and help the new members. Okay, I think that's the rationale there, and that's maybe what this is actually about. April 1st, 2020, some church history sites begin offering virtual tours. So again, easier for new members to learn about church history. April 4th, 2020, a new church symbol is introduced. We all know the new church symbol, and it really strongly uh, reinforces in the mind that this is the Church of Jesus Christ. It's a symbol that everybody should recognize. Uh, Everyone should pretty much. I think everyone in the world would recognize that that's Jesus Christ, and so that was a really important change, I think. Um, April 5th, 2020, President Nelson issues the Restoration of the Fullness of the Gospel of Jesus Christ, a bicentennial proclamation to the world. Right? And is this actually more geared toward new members, something for them to look back at and study? August 14th, 2020, the First Presidency announces 3 global magazines will replace current 4. So it's like more streamlining. Ensign title is retired and New Era renamed. So again, becoming more global, more synchronized, more streamlined. April 4th, 2021, President Nelson announces 20 new temples, the most announced by the church at one time. And for what? Well, there's going to be a lot more people joining the church, and uh, all the time there's new people joining the church, but especially when that big influx happens. May 6th, 2021, based on area presidency direction and approval, eligible members of the church anywhere in the world may now be considered a senior service may now be considered for a senior service mission according to a letter from the First Presidency. So, more missionaries. May 24th, 2021, the First Presidency announces discontinuation of time-only marriages in temples. So, I've never even like heard of that, right? Because a time-only marriage is like you're just married for this life. I don't know if that would be the case for like, say, maybe you have 2 people, their spouses died, and so they marry each other, but they're already sealed to their previous spouse, so they're just doing a time only marriage to keep each other company for the rest of life. Um, I assume that's what this is referring to. So they're not doing that anymore. Now this could have to do with the LGBTQ thing, taking out like actual marriages out of the temple so that they can't try and legally force themselves into the temple. Um, Not that the Lord would ever permit that, but we have to make the changes necessary and not just expect miracles when we ourselves can make changes. And this, of course, would be inspired by the Lord, but it may have to do with that. But another thing, so that's one bird, but the second bird could be sealing rooms needed for new members, no more time only marriages. So, in other words, sealing rooms not being taken up. Like, we need all sealing rooms because, hey, we can't be doing time only marriages. There's 2 billion people that want to get sealed right now. Okay. Oh, and that's all that I have so far on this list. There's probably more that I could add. If you thought of anything, send me an email, ideally, and then I can add it to this list. But you can see that all these changes, like this, just like this flurry of changes, It may not just be because, oh, we're becoming more of a global church, because it's not like there's been like a dramatic spike in converts to the church. I mean, the church does continue to grow, but this is like a lot of stuff really fast, really hot and heavy. And you have to wonder, why does it all have to happen so quickly? Maybe it's because the second coming is upon us. And the old way of doing things was great for that period of time, but now we're in a transition and we need to get these things kind of up and going for a couple years or something like that before the second coming. So you see what I'm saying? So potentially what you could refer to, I probably wouldn't refer to it this way, but maybe in one sense you could think of it as the second harvest. Again, that's what this video is all about. These two quotes, are they referring to just like right now, this latter part of the last days before the second coming? Or are they more thinking about the second coming in the mass influx that is coming? That's coming for Sweden. That's coming for the United States. That's coming for Canada and Brazil and everywhere. Saudi Arabia. Who knows? Okay, now a couple parting thoughts here. As I was preparing for this video, that was the bulk of the video, but there's a couple more interesting things that I want to share with you. I came across this talk called "The Lord Will Multiply the Harvest" by Elder Henry B. Eyring. This was back in 1998, so he was in the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. So this was just 1 year before this quote right here. This one was February 1999. The one I'm about to read to you is February 1998. And he said something kind of interesting here. The audience seems to have been because this is under Institute Teaching Seminary, pre-service readings. So it seems like this is more geared toward CES faculty and personnel and stuff like that. But he says something interesting down here. He says, "The words of that promise remind us of one way he has prepared for the great harvest from your efforts," seminary teachers and institute teachers. "It is a principle put in place before the creation of the world and to last through the eternities. It is this: the Lord operates through families. When a blessing is pronounced upon not only a person but when a blessing is pronounced upon not only a person but the generations to follow, there is an endless increase of blessings. Just that simple idea has changed the way I see my students and even the way I see you tonight. We teach students who will be the fathers and the mothers of generations. They not only may be the teachers of their children, they are commanded to be." So this reminded me of what he said recently in the April 2023 General Conference, the most recent conference at the time that I'm making this video. In his talk called "Finding Personal Peace," now President Eyring, second counselor in the first presidency, he says something very similar. And some people have taken this to mean that the second coming is not soon, but I don't think that's what he means. I think what I've noticed, and I've shown this many times on the channel, is that you have general authorities, apostles and prophets that will sometimes, I don't want to say recycle because that makes it sound lazy, like they're like, oh, okay, I have nothing better to say, I'm just going to bring this back up again and reuse it. I think that there's like certain concepts that kind of stick with them, things that they kind of like are focused on, and they'll say it from time to time. So in this quote to the like CES people, he's talking about their responsibility to teach because they're teaching fathers and mothers of future generations, right? And so there's a multiplier effect. And remember, the name of this talk in 1998, "The Lord Will Multiply the Harvest." And he's talking about one way that that happens, the effect that correct teaching has, not on just the current generation, but on future generations. So when we see this theme repeated this last conference, I don't think so much that he's talking about the second coming per se. In a sense, yes, but let me explain. Okay, first let me read this. The rising generation will become the nurturers of the generation to follow. The multiplier effect will produce a miracle. It will spread and grow over time, and the Lord's kingdom on earth will be prepared and ready to greet him with shouts of Hosanna. There will be peace on earth. So he seems to be talking about just now and how we're doing things. People are still being taught, right? Um, the mothers in Zion should be nurturing their families, the fathers too, but especially the mothers. Both parents should be teaching their children correct principles as we prepare for the second coming. And we are going to be preparing for that time, no matter how soon or far away it is. I think sooner than later. We're going to be also essentially affecting this initial part of the millennium in up until that time when the gospel fills the entire earth. You know, what we're doing right now is going to have a lot of impact on what happens in the millennium as the truth is spreading throughout the earth. We can multiply it. There can be a multiplier effect if you teach your children correctly, right? So I just thought that was interesting. And then to finish off, and this is interesting that we're finishing with President Hinckley, but we're talking about President Hinckley again, and this is a year before what Elder Eyring said in 1998 in his talk called "The Multiplier." The Lord will multiply the harvest. So President Hinckley's talk is Converts and Young Men, April 1997. This is General Conference. Okay. At this time, well, of course, yeah, 1997, of course, he's president of the church. Okay. Well, let me read the subheading here. Every convert is precious. Every convert is a son or daughter of God. Every convert is a great and serious responsibility. Okay. Skipping down a couple paragraphs, he says, each year, a substantial number of people become members of the church, largely through missionary efforts. Last year, there were 321,385 converts comprised of men, women, and children. This is a large enough number, and then some, in one single year to constitute 100 new stakes of Zion. 100 new stakes per year. Think of it. This places upon each of us an urgent and pressing need to fellowship those who join our ranks. So, when we go back to this original quote, where President Hinckley is talking to the Swedes, right? In fact, where did it say here? Does it give a date? I don't know that it gives a date, so I have no idea when President Hinckley initially said this to the two twins. But it must have been, who knows, like what, 60s, 70s, maybe the 50s, I don't know. But sometime back then. So he was talking about the first harvest that took place in the very early days of the church, and then telling them, hey, when you go home, tell them that there's going to be a second harvest. And then in the year 2000, the two twins seem to be of the opinion that the second harvest is happening. And I don't doubt them. Again, I don't think that this is necessarily a rock solid idea. The most rock solid idea of a second harvest, I think, comes from the book of Revelation, talking about the harvest of the righteous, the harvest of the wicked, which, like I said, I think relates to the big harvest after the second coming. But anyway, so here we are in 1997, just 3 years before this Gothenburg, Sweden, a second harvest article is published. So it's at the same time that President Hinckley is president of the church. And he said this just 3 years before. So maybe it is the time of the second harvest. And, at this point, being however many years later, 23 plus years, we're well into that second harvest. So, anyway, this places upon each of us an urgent and pressing need to fellowship those who join our ranks. It is not an easy thing to become a member of this church. In most cases, it involves setting aside old habits, leaving old friends and associates, and stepping into a new society which is different and somewhat demanding. With the ever increasing number of converts, we must make an increasingly substantial effort to assist them as they find their way. Every one of them needs three things: a friend, a responsibility, and nurturing with the good word of God. It is our duty and opportunity to provide these things. And I think that this is still relevant today, more than 23 years later. Uh, 26 years later from the time that he said this. So maybe think about the new converts in your ward or branch and fellowship them. Help make it easy. Help lift their burden. I'm sure it is a really strange experience going from whatever you were living before to coming to this church. But anyway, he just he mentioned this right here. 100 new stakes in a year. Let's just do one last thing. Wikipedia LDS membership growth. I want to see what. Okay, so we're looking at this second column, which is number change. So he was saying that in 1997, the next year it was less, but then the year after that it was even more, 398,745. And I'm not so sure that we've seen that many since that time. I guess you could say that was a sort of hinge point. And it's interesting that it happened in the year 1999. For the year 1999, there was kind of like this spike. Um, Now, it was not the biggest year on record. It looks like the biggest year was probably this, 1989. Interestingly, exactly 10 years before, which is kind of weird. Let me just highlight these. So, and then the year after that, 1990, that was a really good year too, relatively speaking, because that was, okay, so 89, more than 500,000 in 89. And then 1990, almost 500,000. So, anyway, the fact of the matter is, since 1999, we have not seen another year like that, or that has brought in as many people, unfortunately. And in fact, 1997, right here, let me just double check it. Yeah, we haven't seen a year like that either since that time. The only one was 1999. All other years did not match what President Hinckley was talking about in that talk. So um, I have to wonder if these years, or this decade, the 90s, if that was kind of like a type of hinge point, you know. Um, I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see how things go as time goes on. We'll just have to wait and see. But could it be an indicator that this second harvest, or at least pre-second coming second harvest, is winding down? It could be. It could be. I have no idea. I'd love to hear your thoughts. But anyway, so just as a recap, is this like a doctrine of the church? No, not that I can tell. I don't think it's like, you wouldn't call it doctrine. It may be a concept that they've talked about, knowing or having the revelation to know what's going to happen at the second coming. And it may or may not be tied to what's talked about in Revelation 14 about these two harvests. So I don't know. If you have any other thoughts, feel free to put it down. Put it down in the comments below or send me an email. One last thing I guess I'd like to talk about now that I'm thinking about it. I've heard a couple times now, and I've heard it throughout my life, where a general authority will come through and maybe like at a special stake conference or area devotional or something, they'll pronounce a type of like prophecy for that area. So, for example, in Spain, we were told that the day, I don't know who said it. Maybe I wrote this down in my journal, maybe I didn't. I wish I had if I haven't. But I was told on my mission that a general authority had said of Spain that the day is going to come where people are baptized by the stake, you know. So in other words, like, so, man, it's been so long. It's been like 20 years now. I think it was something to the effect that like each day a stake's worth of people will be baptized, something like that. Another thing, like here in the Wichita area, a general authority had said that where you have wards that are part of the Wichita stake, they themselves are going to become stake centers. And sorry, I don't have all the details on that. If you have like a similar statement, if you've written something down, I would appreciate it if you send it in, just so we can kind of like see some of these things that have been said. You know, of course, we'll have to take it with a grain of salt, you know, because it's not like those things, unless it's like been published by like the church news or something like that. But send it in anyway. It might be interesting to take a look at that. So, okay, well, that's going to be it for this one. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also, make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.